Football Friday here on Birds 365. You got Mac, McMullen, and McDonald, and we are joined by one Marc Farzetta from the Farzy Studios. How's your summer going, Farzy?
It was going great up until yesterday, where I participated. I didn't get it. I didn't talk football yesterday. I played football yesterday.
Yeah, man. You don't have the ego of Kincaid, so Kincaid's posting its highlights. I didn't see any Farzetta highlights.
That's because I had to go back. Kevin Kincaid was on my team yesterday. Love Kevin. He's a great dude. Does great work over at Crossing Broad and all that. But, man, he was definitely showing me up yesterday. He had a couple touchdowns for us yesterday. I did, admittedly so, post a touchdown pass from 4 years ago that I threw to my man Crockett, radio personality Crockett. And I will just say this. 4 years ago, I wasn't really sore. This year, I am really sore.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That bubble's brutal, man.
Oh, yeah.
The difference between the turf and the grass, man, it's real. It's real.
Yeah, it was great, though. I was representing Team Chop, so we were all about the kids. Man, we were all about the children yesterday. I wish I could have given them a better performance, but it was a rough day. It was a rough day for Team Chop.
The Cannon didn't get to show off. Marc the Cannon Farzetta. Yeah.
I'll tell you this. Dave, who does a great job of doing all the PR and marketing for NRG, really loves this flag football game. He goes all out. He gives nicknames to players and all that stuff. And on my scouting report, they called me the Cannon because of that throw I made a couple of years ago. I didn't get a chance to really show off the Cannon this year. It was definitely not the Cannon. It was more like the pistol.
That bubble.
Who
That bubble.
you as the quarterback?
Yeah.
We had a 10-year NRG veteran who I will not out, but he took over a lot of the responsibilities of play calling, coaching for the most part. AJ Feely was our coach. He was our coach.
Nice.
But it was good to see him. Good to catch up with him. But we had a gentleman kind of run the show for us yesterday. So I was a mere cog in the wheel. I was just there to help the ball club in any way that I could. Team guy.
Somehow as a cog, you came up painful today. I guess they ripped those flags out a little too harshly.
Oh, it was vicious. It was vicious, man. Yeah, really aggressive.
But good on you for getting out and raising some money for a very good cause.
Sure.
All right, ran this by Johnny Mac, first segment, and if you haven't given us any thought, take a second if you just want to come up with a name. Who's the most underrated player on the Philadelphia Eagles going into the 2023 season?
Ooh, I love the underrated player. If I got to go underrated, I got to go with Reed Blankenship because I think Reed Blankenship is going to show you that he's not going to be an all-pro safety. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler. But I think you are actually going to step up in that position slightly from what you saw last year. I think Reed Blankenship showed you a lot in his rookie campaign.
Wow.
And Johnny Mac, I know you and I have talked about this before about how, the MO on him for a lot of people, myself included, for a time before you educated me on the situation. Reed Blankenship went in that third preseason game, and that's why you watch the third preseason game. You want to see who really steps up and really solidifies their spot on the roster. And he absolutely did that. You thought he was a little bit more in the coach's favor than I did going into that game, but I thought he absolutely, it was the stone cold lock that he was going to make the roster out of that game. And not only did he make the roster, but he immediately puts Aaron Rodgers in his book. He picks him up. He comes up with a couple of big hits on Saquon Barkley in the Giants games, including the playoffs. And he went from, in my mind last year, the term serviceable is how you rate a guy that isn't going to hurt you. I think you're going to see him help you a lot more from the strong safety position, if you even want to call it a strong safety position, than what you were able to get last year, for instance. I think you're going to have a step up from Marcus Epps. I think Reed Blankenship is going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder because I don't think many people look at him and say, oh, he's going to be more than serviceable. He's going to be he's going to be a good, strong safety for you coming into this season.
So if you got Reed locked in, which he very well might be, Marc, and you want to get Sidney Brown on the field, Terrell Edmonds out?
Yeah. On the outs, you mean? Yeah. I think it's
you're only
possible.
paying him $600,000 guaranteed.
Mhm.
It's one of those deals. Last year was Jaquiski Tart, right?
Yeah.
Jaquiski Tart. He started for the 49ers. Good player, recognizable name, solid on a good defense. Jody and I have talked about this a bunch. We have fans here saying, "Oh, you got to have Tart. He's the best safety on the field.
Best safety on the team."
Yeah. Now, coaching staff, he didn't get off the ground with the coaching staff. He didn't get off the freaking third team. Edmonds is already on the first team. It's only OTAs, but he's already impressed the coaching staff more. So I don't want to make that comparison. But, are you going to keep him as a backup if he's not the starter? It's like Anthony Harris is the better comp. Like Anthony Harris was going to be the starting safety right up until August 30th when they traded to CJ Gardner-Johnson. And then he was out because he wasn't going to be a backup. Doesn't play special teams, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Edmonds. If he doesn't win that starting job, is he going to be here?
Yeah. The interesting thing with this year is that you already know you're having a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience in Reed Blankenship as one of your starting safeties. So they might want to go the route of a little bit more experience if they do decide to have a guy like Edmonds take over.
Yeah.
That's why I thought you were saying it was going to be more a lock in the other direction. Not that he's on the out, but that he might be a starter.
Oh, I think he's going to be a starter.
Okay. I agree.
I think he's going to be a starter.
But Sidney Brown, though, the interesting thing there is that if he just blows you away in training camp, if he really goes out there and shows you that he's worthy of that safety position, you might say, well, the hell with experience. I'm just going to go with who's better. And he might be the guy that ends up winning that spot. And don't get me wrong. I think the Eagles, and I think every Eagles fan also, when you take a draft pick like that for a starting safety, you want somebody to come in and be a starter for you. Sidney Brown could be that guy where he justifies the pick immediately and becomes a starting safety. Now, it's not a first-round pick, obviously, so it's not the same type of stock, but it's still a young player with a good experience in college, obviously, that could come out here and turn a lot of heads in training camp. And if he does that, yes, you're going to have an inexperienced secondary, but you're going to have a secondary that can, I think, flat-out ball. And if they could do that, then, they might lean in the direction of going with the younger secondary as opposed to going with a more seasoned veteran, if you will.
Yeah, I think the guy who's in trouble is Justin Evans. He was in the mix until they drafted Sidney Brown. Now I think he's on the outside looking in. But
what about Kayvon Wallace?
Man, what was the point? Oh, you were making earlier about moving Devontae Maddox to safety. Kayvon Wallace was there the whole time. And they said, we don't really want to put Kayvon on the field. So unless he has a killer camp, is he going to spend another year on the practice squad guy? Can they drop him down on the practice squad?
Well, you can put veterans on the practice squad. That's not an issue anymore since they changed the rules. But, he's been a big part of the team, special teams wise. Once again, everybody, and they weren't great on special teams. So the last thing you want to do,
I think we can get Farzy out there on special teams if we can get him. Where he's not score after the game. Then we get him out there making tackles on
quarterbacks don't play special teams. I mean, you can't put the cannon on special teams.
You can't sacrifice.
I think we determined he's not the cannon anymore. That's why I'm telling you, Farzetta, get down there, cover that punt.
Wow. Special teams. Hey, whatever helps the ball club, and good Lord willing, things will work out. You know what I'm saying?
How do you?
No, but just to go back to Kayvon Wallace for a second, the biggest knock against Kayvon Wallace is Reed Blankenship. Like the fact that he was getting the reps and he was getting the starter time and all that stuff, and it wasn't Kayvon Wallace. I think like a lot of people, they were, if not secretly, they were outwardly open, wanting Kayvon Wallace to be the guy because he had a relationship with Brian Dawkins.
And it's a safety from Clemson.
Exactly. His roommates with Doc's son and all that. So you had that connection that you would hopefully see. Oh, well, he's got the Dawkins connection there. You want to see him as a strong, you want the free safety or safety for this team, and then you see other guys go up and pass him, and it's just not there.
I believe there's 12 or 13 safeties in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and people are going, "Oh, he roomed with his son, so maybe he's going to be number 14."
Yeah. How many pizzas did they share? So that means he's got some of that Doc gene in him.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That is a very tough one.
Mm-hmm.
But, Reed impressed the coaching staff that gave the pads went on.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they said, whoa.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he was a 5-year starter in college, which, sometimes they hold it against you.
Yeah, usually that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Right. So it's that sort of line between he knows how to play versus he might be a little bit too old, a little bit too much tread off the tire. But boy, it worked out short term because he was their best rookie last year. He was their best rookie. I mean, Jordan played well and he was playing well until he got hurt. And then he sort of was on the back burner. Cam didn't play. Jacoby didn't play. Reed Blankenship was their best rookie last year.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very fair statement. The other thing that I can look at with him is that, I mean, look, it was 1 year. He wasn't the starter of the entire season, but it was a good amount of it. The things I mentioned, the hits on Saquon Barkley, the pick of Aaron Rodgers is great. But what I look for in every rookie, especially one that's like an undrafted guy, for instance, is you just want to look at a guy and see that he belongs. And he did that tenfold last year in everything that he did. And yeah, you put the pads on, and that's when he's most comfortable, when he's able to play fast and physical. And if you're a safety in the NFL, that's when you should be most comfortable, is when you can actually hit people. And I remember the same thing, John, that you're referencing when you talk about what Nick Sirianni said about him last year. And I think it was after the pick on Aaron Rodgers, after that Green Bay game, he came out and said all the stuff about 5-year starter, about how all the coaches in college said, yeah, no, hold on a second. I know that that's usually a knock on somebody, Jody, just like you were saying, but this is a guy that we wanted to keep around. This is a guy that wanted to be around, and he wanted to make sure that he got everything he could out of his college experience. And then when he had the opportunity at the NFL level to capitalize on that and show that what he could really do, oh, man, he did that. He looked more than comfortable on the field. He looked like a guy that belonged. He looked like a guy. I was talking about the experience knock on that secondary, on that safety position. This looks like a guy who plays like he's been around the NFL for 5 years as opposed to 5 years in college.
Fuzzy, need your take on something that John and I have been batting back and forth ever since the Eagles had their activities, not practice, activities.
Yeah, social gatherings.
Activity. Yeah. Yes. And they get guys out there for certain drills in certain orders in certain positions that you try and read between the lines with. Starting right guard for the Philadelphia Eagles. Oof. We know that Cam Jurgens is someone that they think highly of. He backed up Kelsey all last year, which means he doesn't get on the field because Kelsey never leaves the field. But has got the abilities and some traits that make you believe he could play right guard. But then what happens if Kelsey gets hurt? Do you just throw him back there? Do you throw a lesser choice for backup center? It might depend on whether it's just a one play in the game or it's going to be a couple of games. Tyler Steen, high draft pick this year, but not a guard. And he's learning the position is new. And Jeff Stoutland, the guy who's going to make the decision, we know his overall opinions on how you best build an offensive line. Who's going to be the starting right guard for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Cam Jurgens is going to be the starting right guard. However, I thought it was really interesting, and I don't know who it was that asked the question, but they asked Lane Johnson during his press conference when he was talking about how the abductor is good to go and he's healthy and everything. And then, hey, starting right guard, what are you looking for? The question was a very general, what are you looking for in a right guard? And I thought that's when he was going to take the opportunity to start just saying glowing things about Cam Jurgens. And he started off by saying, yeah, both these guys really, handle the position well. And I'm like, say what now? Both these guys? What do you mean both these guys? And then I remembered, of course, Steen is here, but I didn't think he'd even be in consideration for the role until maybe a couple of years down the line when you do see, or next year if Jason Kelsey's not here and you do have Cam Jurgens as your center of the future. But he was like, both these guys come in here and they've learned the position well. They've done a great job. They're incredibly strong. Obviously, the Eagles introduced the left tackle of Tyler Steen as a guard during the draft, which is interesting. But he said glowing things about both these guys. And I was like, hold on a second. They're not going to have – hold on. Like you just asked me, Jody, who's the starting right guard? It's Cam Jurgens. But is there actually going to be more of a competition here than we really thought between these two players for the right guard position? Cam Jurgens is going to be the right guard. But the fact that the team is talking about it in a different light, Nick Sirianni talked about it in a different light when he addressed the media at the close of the social gatherings that were the OTAs. But when you look at it from a Jeff Stoutland position, if you look at it from even a Lane Johnson position, you want to make sure that these young guys, whether they be a second-year player like Cam Jurgens or a rookie like Tyler Steen, they're looking at it as if it's a competition. Nothing is guaranteed in the NFL, as we all know. Those two are going to have to battle it out for the position. But again, I believe it'll be Cam Jurgens being the starting right guard for the Eagles.
Yeah, I think it was Baldy who was talking to Lane, and Lane said, he'd like a bigger guy at guard. Lane loved Brandon Brooks.
Yeah.
Obviously. Well, we all did, but great player when he was healthy. And he was huge. I mean, Brandon played at like 350. And then Isaac, not as huge. Too often fans look at the roster, they don't always tell the truth. So I think Isaac was listed at 305 pounds, and Cam, I'm looking for Cam right now. They list Cam at 303. All right. They ain't the same size. I don't know, if Isaac is legit 305 and Cam's 285, they're not close to being the same size. But when that comes into it, I think it's a bigger deal for Kelsey than Lane, because Kelsey's undersized as a center, and they've always protected him with these big bodies inside. Landon, even more so on the other side. Landon's like 340.
Yeah. He's a big boy.
Yeah. So to me, it's more important to protect Kelsey with that size. But if you're good, you're good. Cam Jurgens was talking about, he's not going to be Brandon Brooks, right? He's got to play a different way, but he's tremendously athletic. Maybe they can play a different way, but either way, they're going to be fine. That's how I look at it.
No, I think the same way. And I don't know if that's us being spoiled by Jeff Stoutland's success as the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator. I don't know if that's because you got a Hall of Fame center in Jason Kelsey and a guy who hasn't allowed a sack since the Stone Age in Lane Johnson. We've been spoiled. As far as the offensive line goes, they've been great. They took a guy who was a rugby player out of Australia. Now all of a sudden he's your starting left tackle, taking over for Jason Peters, and they haven't missed a beat in that regard. You could go back and talk about all the guys on the roster that they've had at the offensive line position and had success with. Halapoulivaati Vaitai winning a Super Bowl with him at left tackle. I have confidence in the system. I have confidence in the guy now picking the players to go into that system and Howie Roseman, and then he's handing them to a guy that can handle it better than anybody in the NFL and Jeff Stoutland. So it's like going into this, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting on Cam Jurgens, but I don't feel like you lose big on a bet if it ends up being Tyler Steen, because this is being very much evaluated by a very good coaching staff and being evaluated by very good talent evaluators in the front office. Whereas one of those things like, I think it's going to be Cam Jurgens, and I hope it is. He's going to be the second-year player, have a chance to make his mark on the NFL, get his feet wet for when he does slide slightly over to his left and take over as the center. But if they decide to go Steen, then that means he really blew people away there in training camp.
And by the way, if you got to go all the way down to the contingency, say Cam can't play right guard, right? The worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyler's not ready to make the transition. You just put Jack Driscoll in there. You're fine. You're still fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're still fine. It might screw up a little bit of the game day backup situation, but Jeff doesn't like moving pieces around. Maybe he'd have to in that type of situation. But man, I mean, there's a lot of insurance policies. That's what the Eagles are good at. Contingencies.
And here's the thing that I'll say about the offensive line coach, and he's in a different position than some of the other coaches on the Eagles staff, specifically last year. I was critical of both Gannon and Nick Rallis that they couldn't get Nakobe Dean some reps last year in the games where the Eagles were up by 2 touchdowns. Really, Kaiser White and Edwards had to stay on the field for basically every single snap. I get it. You're in the moment. You want to win the game. You're undefeated at 8-0. Blah, blah, blah. Whole thing the way that the year laid out last year. But I think it's every coach's responsibility to look to the future. Not only this game today, but the next month, the next year, 2 years down the line. Stoutland doesn't have to do that. Offensive linemen, that's not the case. You're not moving guys in and out. Linebackers, you can move a linebacker in and out. You can sub out a linebacker. Offensive linemen don't sub out. They stay in. When you're in, you're in. When you're out, you're out. You only get in when a guy gets hurt. So I don't think that he'll look at it that way, but I can here on Birds 365. I think they're rooting for Steen to win the job because that way they can keep Juergens just as a backup center and not have to worry about it. No, he's the guy. And then what happens when he moves over to right guard? He's pretty damn good. And then Kelsey says at the end of the year, see ya, I'm out of here. Well, now what do you do at center? No, you'd rather have the guy right there. Now, Steen's got to earn it. If he's not good enough, if Juergens is just flat out better, then of course Juergens is going to be the guy. But if they're even, Johnny Mac and Marc Farzetta, if they're dead even, and Stoutland's being honest with himself, they both did the job to the same exact level. Who do you think they start?
If I'm going first, Jody, I'll say that's a really interesting way to phrase that question.
Yeah,
that's an experienced interviewer phrasing that question. I think you're right. I think they go Steen. If it's dead even, and you have an opportunity to not change the position of the guy that you think is going to be your center for the next decade in the NFL, then I'm going to keep him in that position and not have him worry about moving around on the offensive line. I will say that I think it's interesting that some of the players have come out and talked about Cam Juergens committing to versatility. And throughout walkthroughs, he always wanted to get reps at the right guard spot or at the guard's spot just to be more familiar with those spots in case he was called upon to come off the bench and be a starter at either guard position. So he's got a dedication to the versatility already, but that's just a guy who wants to get on the football field. If you want to make sure that he's picking up everything he can at the center position, then yeah, you hold him back. But it also depends on whether or not they look at Steen as a guy that can not only be the starting right guard for this year, but obviously for the future as well. Yeah. And then they'll also look at it in another way, thinking about it like this, whether or not they just want to make sure Cam Juergens can go out there and hit men, not college guys, but get the experience of hitting NFL defensive linemen and making sure he's picking up blitzes from linebackers or safeties, whoever's coming through, and just get that type of experience while he's right next to Lane Johnson. Or excuse me, not necessarily Lane Johnson, but more so Jason Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that scenario that Jody laid out, yeah, dead even, yeah, I go with Tyler Steen because long term, that's the goal. Long term, it's going to be Juergens at center, Tyler Steen at right guard. That's the plan. And if it's dead even, you might. I don't get this thought process of, oh, Cam was the 51st pick last year, so he's got to get on the field. No, he doesn't. No, who cares? He was drafted to be the heir apparent to Jason Kelsey. Now he's the third one. Isaac was drafted to be the heir apparent. Landon was drafted to be the heir apparent. And Jason keeps going and going and going and going. But I think we now know, all right, it's really close to the end. Last year he said he was going to retire. He told Lane he was going to retire. And they were so successful. He had so much fun. They don't have him practice. That helps. He said if this were Doug, he'd be gone already because the practices were tougher. So we're closer to the end, and Cam's going to be the center. He's going to be the center. So long term, dead even, but dead even. How can that even happen, though? Right. I'll say that. So somebody's going to win the job. But I do think if we're dead even, yeah, you might as well get it started. Tyler Steen's drafted to be the right guard. Let him play right guard. Ultimately, when Lane retires, I think you're going to try to replace him with a, first round pick. That's what they're going to try to replace him with. Tyler Steen, some people have said, well, maybe he'll be the right tackle. Well, the reason they announced him as a guard, Mark, his arms are too small to play tackle. That's why they project him inside. Now, people can roll their eyes and say that's goofy, but that's the way the NFL thinks. So if long-term your plan is to have Cam Juergens at center, Tyler Steen at right guard, and Tyler Steen proves he can play the position at the same level as Cam Juergens, yeah, I'm Tyler Steen all day. It makes too much sense.
All right, quickie trivia quiz for both you two guys. What team in the National Football League led the league in penalties on their offensive line last year?
Oh, the Eagles.
Eagles were number one in penalties on the offensive line.
Really? Number
41,
one? Wow.
41 offensive line penalties, more than
And
any
by
other
the way,
team.
they could have had 81 if they called Lane's false starts, but reputation is part of it.
That is one of the most amazing things, Lane Johnson. If you play it at regular speed, you don't see it. If you play it at half speed, you don't see it. If you play it at like 1/4 speed, you go, shoot, did he jump? Did he get off before they snapped the ball? You have to slow it down so much to see. He is so good at reading that at the exact split second they snap the ball. He does get that little bit of an edge every single time, but and they never call it on him. Is that nitpicking to go, hey, you got to clean that up? Lead the league in offensive line penalties? What's wrong with this offensive line? Well, they're the best offensive line in football, but they do take the most penalties. Is that something Stoutland should be working on? And should we have fear of it this year because they're plugging in a new guy at right guard, whoever he may be?
I mean, I think so. I knew the Eagles were up there. I thought top 5. I didn't think number 1.
Tied for first.
Tied for who was the other team?
I think.
Do you have it in front of you?
I forget.
All right, no, whatever. So
two teams at 41 specific offensive line penalties last year.
All right, first off, the Lane Johnson thing, let me just say this. I think that's really happening a lot throughout the league where they're looking at those experienced tackles like Lane Johnson, for instance.
My God.
They're old veteran pitchers in baseball that are getting the corners, and it's not on the corner. They're getting those calls, if you will. But if I'm Jeff Stoutland, absolutely. I mean, what's your job? Your job is to make sure that you make life as easy as possible for the offense to move down the field, not move backwards on the field. And when you get called for those penalties, not only are they moving you back on the field, but they couldn't negate a play on the other side of the field the penalty had nothing to do with. So that, to me, is something you have to work on because you can't shoot yourselves in the foot. And when you look at games that the Eagles struggled a little bit in last year, and obviously there weren't a lot of them, but when they did struggle, you saw the penalties. You saw the moments where it was either a penalty or it was something else that would shoot you in the foot, a turnover, a drop pass, whatever it might be. So eliminate those opportunities where the defense is going to have success, and that will make the offense more successful. So imagine that. You called for the most penalties in the NFL on your offensive line, what we all talk about here. I knew they had a struggle-filled season, but as far as the penalties went, I think it was number 1. But think about it like this. You just can't make it more difficult for your offense to advance the football. And if that's what you're thinking is Jeff Stoutland, then that's something you are definitely working on in this offseason.
I always tell the story. Jody might recognize the name. Tim Irwin. You're probably a little bit too young, Mark.
I know the name.
Long-time starter, about 15 years in the league. Really good player. Became an agent, became a judge. Really interesting guy, but lawyer, obviously. He was the Vikings starting right tackle for years. He gave Reggie White fits. You know why he gave Reggie White fits? They let him tackle Reggie White. They let him do anything because he was around so long and he had the reputation. And then he finally retired, and they brought in Corey Stringer, which is another story, very sad story, but tremendous player early in his career, developed into, maybe the best right tackle in football before the tragedy. And he couldn't block Reggie. Because they wouldn't give him the tricks of the trade. He was a young player. He had to earn it.
You gotta earn it.
And Tim would just, Reggie would hate playing him because he would maul him and he'd get away with it. It was unbelievable.
One of the things people always talk about with John Runyon, and you just reminded me of this. Runyon would always
similar player, by the way. Very similar player to John Runyon.
Exactly. And John would always get called as like the cheater, or, he would, find ways to, manipulate the game or whatever. Well, when you ask John about it, Ronnie would always talk about how it's like, it's not cheating. It's not cheap shots. It's being a veteran and understanding the game and knowing what you can get away with. And to me, that's gamesmanship. That's part of it. It also kind of says exactly what everybody else says, but in a different way, but like a politician. But it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going up against guys that are most likely going to beat you. Find a way to manipulate the game or the rules in your favor, knowing what you can get away with.
Yeah. All right. Farzy, last thing before we let you run, and it's a favor. It's not a question. You putting in the good work yesterday, charitable time down at the bubble. Unfortunately, they didn't use the cannon. That's their mistake. But know that you've got this kind of relationship now with Jeff Lurie. I need you to ask him for me. I want to see the Eagles on Hard Knocks this year. We're into mid-June now, and they still haven't named the Hard Knocks team. Usually they name it in March. We're in friggin' mid-June, and they haven't picked the Hard Knocks team out yet. The Eagles can't be forced to do it because they've got certain rules and regulations here. If you want to get out of it, here's a get-out-of-jail-free card. There's only 4 teams that don't have that get-out-of-jail-free card this year. The Jets, the Saints, and 2 more. I can't remember who that. Bears and somebody. Commanders. And that's who I think it might be if they get that sale done next week and Joshua Harris takes over. But Jeff Lurie could trump them all. He could get Goodell on the phone and go, Raj, we'll volunteer to do it this year. I'd love to see this team on Hard Knocks. The personalities, Jalen Hurts, everything. Let the nation see Jalen Hurts. You got the owner's ear. Just go to Mr. Lurie and go, you know what? Be a guy. Give the Eagle fans something more to sink their teeth into this year. Let's put them on Hard Knocks. Can you do that for me?
I will. I'll make some phone calls. He's texting me, but it's so much. I was just like, hey, I don't like getting back to him.
Put him. Yeah, you gotta mute him.
Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes, there, Jeff. You know what I'm saying? But as far as your enthusiasm, Jody, for having them on, I would love to see them on Hard.
Yes.
What Eagles? Anybody that says, I don't want them to have the distraction. You don't want them to have. You don't want to have that sort of inside access. When they did what was it, All Access that Prime
Amazon.
did? Amazon.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. Thank you.
That's not as good as Hard Knocks.
No, I 1,000% agree. I 1,000% agree, Jody. But it's as close as they have come to Hard Knocks. And I would love to see them featured on something like that. I want to see Nick Sirianni behind the scenes. I want to see some of the stories play out that players have told us about, what a player's coach he is. I want to see Jeff Stoutland behind the scenes. Like I'm forgetting his name now, but he was the offensive line coach for the Browns. But I know he exists.
The big.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I know he exists because of Hard Knocks. Okay. I want to see the personalities behind the scenes. I want to see Jalen Hurts, as you were saying, Joe, behind the scenes. I want to see the relationship more between him and A.J. Brown. I want to see guys developing. I want to see how this running back room is going to come together. I want to see Jason. You mean to tell me you wouldn't want to see Jason Kelce coaching up Cam Jurgens? You mean to tell me you wouldn't want to see that? Yeah. Everyone wants to see that. I'm all for it. I love Hard Knocks. Maybe I'll get back to Jeffrey and I'll say let's do it.
Take him off mute. Just a quickie before we get out of here. John, what's the chance of that happening?
0.
Yeah,
Can I go negative? That's what I thought. 0.
Yeah.
It's not even 0.0004.
If I could go negative, I would.
If Sirianni has anything to say about it, it's a flat 0.
Yeah.
It's got
He's
no
coming back from Florida.
But Jeffrey's the boss. That's why I'm telling you got to go to Jeffrey. Because if there's anybody who can tell, suck it up, get it done, coach, let the cameras in, it's his boss, and that would be Jeff Lurie. So
by the way,
I got
Bob,
faith in you, Fargie. You're going to make Fargie's going to make this happen.
Yeah. Let me just say this real quick on a behind-the-scenes thing. I'm going to guess that a lot of people here are not soccer fans, like football fans, right? Like overseas, like EPL and stuff. Welcome to Wrexham with Philly native Rob McElhenney of Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
There's an interview with Rob McElhenney at the link with Jeffrey Lurie where they talk about being owners.
Yeah.
And I forget what episode it is, but if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. I've seen every episode. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic show. But it was a really interesting thing going, from Rob McElhenney's point of view, from a fan to now being an owner of a team and then sitting with the guy that owns your favorite football team, American football. It's an amazing, it's a really incredible thing. And I think it's a good look behind the scenes, at least Jeffrey Lurie and his mentality of being an owner.
All right. If you drop the ball, Farzi, we'll get the guy from Wrexham on and get him.
The guy from Wrexham. Yes.
The guy from Wrexham.
Yeah.
He's
Sorry, not a soccer guy.
Bob Wiley, by the way, Farzetta, is the offensive line coach you're talking about.
You know what you want to be? You know what you want to be as an offensive? You want to be a gorilla. You don't want to be a rhino. You want to be a gorilla. And, hey, that speaks to the arms. That speaks to the arms you're talking about there with Steen.
Yeah.
You can catch his show every morning before us here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, The Farzy Show.
And the Phillies postgame show. 500, baby.
500, over 500. I'll be back tonight after the 9:40 start time against the Athletics tonight. Hopefully the Phillies keep it going in Oakland before they move to Vegas.
That is Marc Farzetta here with us on Birds 365. Thanks, Farz.
See you guys. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Marc.
Marc Farzetta. All right, Mac coming back. Hour number 2. We have the guy. Farzetta's gone, right? He's gone now. The cannon is gone. The guy.
We got the MVP of the NRG charity
star of yesterday's charity game underneath the bubble down there.
And also a soccer guy. A lot of soccer talk today.
How did I get sucked into soccer talk?
Wrexham, baby. Wrexham.
Not exactly sure how that happened, but Mac coming back. Hour number 2 coming your way.